Welcome to the realm of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Enjoy listening. Porter Holland had been chosen for one of the most important missions in Earth's history. Sent to a research station deep in space, his task was to test the limits of human physiology in extraterrestrial conditions. However, nothing went as planned. By the third day of his mission, Porter began to feel weak and unsteady. His pulse became irregular, his joints felt powerless, and his breathing grew labored. Faced with the fear of death so early into his mission, Porter was rushed to the medical unit. Thanks to the station's advanced medical equipment, his condition was stabilized, but he still felt drained. The doctors advised him to rest for several days. Despite the short time he had been at the station, Porter had already started forming bonds with some of the inhabitants. What intrigued him the most were the aliens at the station, who seemed to be equally fascinated by him. His presence had become a topic of gossip among them, and their curious glances followed him wherever he went. Among those most captivated by Porter were two alien women, Fika and Nika. In their culture, the human physique was more myth than reality. Now, standing before them was a living, breathing example to study. Upon hearing about Porter's illness, they decided to visit him at the station's only medical unit. One quiet night while the hospital was shrouded in silence, Fika and Nika snuck into Porter's room. Their eyes glimmered with curiosity and excitement as they approached his bed. Gently, they touched his arms, shoulders, chest, and legs, trying to understand the workings of his body. Just as Fika traced her fingers along Porter's forearm, his eyes fluttered open. In the dim light, he saw two unfamiliar figures standing over him. The room's lights flickered slightly as Porter, startled, exclaimed, "What are you doing?" Fika quickly moved to the control panel and pressed a button, activating a holographic mask that gave her the appearance of a doctor. "Please remain calm. We're here to, check your health," she said, feigning professionalism. Nika, holding a random device she had picked up, chimed in nervously. "Yes, just a routine checkup. Nothing to worry about." Porter, though suspicious, was too weak to protest. "I've never seen you before. Why do the doctors look different?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. Fika hesitated before glancing at Nika for help. Thinking quickly, she replied, "Oh, that's because we're on night shift. It's perfectly normal you haven't seen us before. Don't worry, we'll fix everything." Her words managed to calm Porter enough for him to relax, but Fika and Nika had no idea what they were doing. Driven purely by curiosity, they had entered the room without any medical knowledge. Now, they were in way over their heads. Fika, in an attempt to seem competent, began randomly pressing buttons on the control panel. Meanwhile, Nika grabbed another device from the wall and held it over Porter, pretending to run a scan. This device, Nika began, trying to sound authoritative, balances your body's frequencies, and aligns your energy field. "Yes, exactly," Fika added quickly. "It optimizes your hormone levels for better nighttime recovery." Nika leaned closer to Fika and whispered, "What hormones are you even talking about? Does that even make sense?" Fika shrugged nervously. "I don't know, but it sounds scientific." However, the devices they were fiddling with unexpectedly started working. Porter felt a strange warmth spread through his body, his breath quickened, and his heart raced. His eyes widened, and he stammered, "What did you do to me?" Fika tried to maintain her composure. "Oh, it's just part of the procedure." But Porter wasn't listening. Overwhelmed by the sensations coursing through him, his gaze locked onto Nika. Driven by a sudden impulse, he reached out, grabbed her hand, and pulled her close. Without thinking, he kissed her. Nika froze in shock, her glowing eyes wide open. But as an inexplicable warmth enveloped her, she slowly placed her hands on his shoulders, responding to the kiss. Fika, witnessing the scene, shouted, "What are you doing?" Before she could react further, Porter turned to her. He grabbed her arm and pulled her in as well, planting a kiss on her lips. Fika's blue-tinged cheeks seemed to blush as she struggled to comprehend the situation. "Is this a hormonal reaction?" Nika asked breathlessly as she stepped back. Fika, still recovering from her shock, stammered, I think so. I had no idea these devices worked like this. Porter, gasping for air, collapsed back onto the bed. His gaze flickered between the two aliens. I don't know what's happening, but I feel strange, he admitted. Fika and Nika exchanged panicked glances. We have to fix this. Nika whispered urgently. If anyone finds out what we've done, we'll be in serious trouble. You're right, Fika agreed. But we need to undo whatever we just triggered. Let's try other devices. The two aliens scrambled to connect various cables to Porter, pressing random buttons in desperation. Each action seemed to elicit a different reaction from him. At one point, he burst into uncontrollable laughter. "This is fascinating," Porter exclaimed, his voice filled with an odd mixture of amusement and bewilderment. Fika and Nika were more terrified than amused. "That's it," Fika said. "We've done enough. We need to leave now." "Wait," Nika said, leaning closer to Porter. "Please don't tell anyone about tonight. This was just routine maintenance, okay?" Porter, still grinning, nodded. "I doubt I'll ever forget this night," he replied, his gaze lingering on them. As Fika and Nika hurriedly left the room, they couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of their strange encounter. This wasn't the end of it. When Porter opened his eyes, the sunlight streaming into his room slightly eased the fog in his mind. Yet he was still shaken by the events of the previous night. While his body still felt somewhat tired, the strange sensations he had experienced and Fika and Nika's behavior kept replaying in his head. Just then the door opened, and Dr. Haynes, a real doctor, entered the room. A middle-aged man with a serious demeanor, Dr. Haynes walked in while reviewing something on his tablet. However, when he noticed the peaceful yet peculiar smile on Porter's face, he frowned. "Porter, you're looking much better this morning," Dr. Haynes said, examining the health data on his tablet. After a brief pause, he scanned the room and leaned slightly toward Porter. "But I'm curious about what happened here last night. Some things are out of place." Porter squinted at the doctor. "What do you mean?" Dr. Haynes took a step closer and pointed to one of the devices on the table. "This device wasn't active last night, and considering you're the only patient in the hospital, there's no one else who could have intervened. There wasn't supposed to be anyone here on the night shift, but the traces, they show that several devices were connected to your body and some procedure protocols were initiated." Porter remained silent for a moment. Fika and Nika sneaking into his room, randomly pressing buttons, and the chaotic events that followed flashed in his mind. But he couldn't reveal who they were or why they had done such a thing, as it might get them into trouble. Gathering himself, he lied calmly. Well, 2 female doctors came in last night. I think they were on the night shift. They took care of me and checked my health. They seemed very competent." Dr. Haynes frowned even more. "Female doctors? Porter, I'm the only doctor here, and there are no other doctors scheduled for the night shift, especially not female doctors." He paused for a moment. "How would you describe them? What did they look like?" In Porter's mind, he pictured Fika and Nika's purplish-blue skin, glowing eyes, and uniquely attractive yet non-human features. But he couldn't describe them honestly. "Well, they looked very ordinary," he said, averting his eyes. "They were about the same height. They had burgundy hair and wore light-colored uniforms." Dr. Haynes was silent for a few seconds, then sighed. "This is very strange. But anyway, you seem to be recovering now. The morning tests show your levels are returning to normal. I think you can leave here and return to your duties." Relieved, Porter nodded. "Thank you, Doctor." When Porter returned to the research station, questions still lingered in his mind. He wanted to find out what had happened with Fika and Nika, and why they had done such a thing. But as soon as he set foot in the station, he noticed the 2 women avoiding eye contact with him. When Fika and Nika saw him from the other end of the corridor, they quickly turned and headed in the opposite direction. Smiling, Porter followed after them. "Hey, wait!" he called out. Fika and Nika froze in place. As Porter approached them, guilt and fear were evident on their faces. Nika stammered, We apologize if we disturbed you." Porter shook his head and let out a light laugh. "Disturbed me? You saved me, didn't you? I feel amazing right now, and I have you to thank for that." Seeing their shy demeanor, he continued more seriously. But honestly, you need to explain what happened last night. Why did you come to my room? Fika and Nika exchanged glances. Fika, realizing they couldn't avoid the truth any longer, began to speak. We're just curious. Human physiology is like a legend in our culture. We wanted to examine you up close, but things got out of hand. Porter's face softened into a compassionate smile. I understand that, but to be honest, it was a bit unusual. Fika and Nika lowered their heads in embarrassment. Nika muttered, "We won't do anything like that again. Please don't tell anyone." Porter was touched by their innocent yet childlike curiosity. "I won't tell anyone. But how about this? Let's spend tonight together. We can chat a bit. If you want to satisfy your curiosity, let's do it the right way." Fika and Nika hadn't expected this offer. Porter's calm and inviting tone brought a look of surprise to both their faces. Nika lowered her head with a small smile. "All right, it's a deal." That night, Porter invited them to the station's small living quarters. He had prepared a simple but cozy space. Fika and Nika entered with a touch of hesitation. As the conversation progressed, the tension between them eased, replaced by a warm camaraderie. Fika shared stories about their culture, their planet's sky that shimmered in gradients of purple and gold during their equivalent of a sunset, and the grand crystalline cities that refracted light into rainbows, creating an ethereal glow. She explained how their society valued harmony with nature and their deep respect for the interconnectedness of all living beings. Nika, on the other hand, couldn't contain her excitement as she started asking Porter questions about human physiology and culture. "Do all humans have such dense musculature? And what about your eyes? They're smaller, yet they have such depth," she said, leaning in slightly, her curiosity shining through. Porter chuckled, slightly taken aback by her enthusiasm. "Not all humans are the same. We're pretty diverse in terms of physical features. As for the eyes, they're just a window to the soul, or so we say," he replied with a playful grin. Nika tilted her head, intrigued. "A window to the soul? That's poetic. Do humans often speak in such metaphors?" "Some of us do," Porter said, glancing at Fika, who had started sketching something on a piece of paper from his desk. "What's that you're drawing?" he asked. Fika looked up, her cheeks darkening with what Porter assumed was the alien equivalent of a blush. "Oh, just a memory," she said, flipping the paper around. It was a quick, but remarkably detailed sketch of what Porter recognized as her home city. The intricate details of spires and floating walkways were mesmerizing. "It's beautiful," he said sincerely. "I'd love to see it someday." Fika smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Perhaps one day, though it's far, far away from here." The conversation drifted toward Earth, with Porter describing his home planet. He talked about the vast oceans, the sprawling forests, and the bustling cities. Fika and Nika listened intently, their faces lighting up with wonder. Nika, in particular, seemed fascinated by the concept of rain. "So, water falls from the sky?" she asked, her eyes wide. Porter nodded. "Yeah, it's called rain. It's refreshing and often relaxing. There's nothing quite like the sound of rain tapping against a window on a quiet evening." Nika leaned back, her expression dreamy. "Your world sounds magical." Porter chuckled. "It has its flaws, but it's home." As the night deepened, the atmosphere grew even more relaxed. Porter pulled out a small device from his bag, a portable music player. "Want to hear something?" he asked. Fika and Nika nodded eagerly. When he played a soft, instrumental tune, their reactions were priceless. Fika closed her eyes, swaying gently to the rhythm, while Nika stared at the device in awe. This is what you call music?" Nika asked. "Yes, it's a universal language," Porter said, watching as the two alien women immersed themselves in the melody. Fika opened her eyes, a thoughtful expression on her face. "In our culture, music is rare. It's reserved for ceremonies, but this feels like something you could listen to anytime, just to feel." "That's exactly the point," Porter said, smiling. The trio spent hours sharing stories, music, and laughter. Fika and Nika taught Porter a few words in their language, their lilting accents making even the most mundane phrases sound musical. Porter, in turn, tried teaching them a human handshake, which resulted in a lot of awkward fumbling and laughter. By the time the conversation wound down, the bond between them had deepened. Fika and Nika no longer seemed like mysterious beings from another world. They were friends, curious, kind, and relatable in their own unique ways. As they prepared to leave, Nika hesitated at the door. "Thank you, Porter, for sharing so much with us. This night, it means more than you can imagine." Porter smiled warmly. "Thank you, too, for everything. This was just the beginning, I hope." Fika nodded, her gaze steady. "Yes, this is just the beginning." And so, that night became a cornerstone in their relationship, a moment when differences faded and understanding took root. Despite their worlds being light years apart, Porter, Fika, and Nika proved that friendship had no boundaries.